let me start with just why it's important. It's the heart, literally the beating heart of what we call creative leadership. If there's one thing that leaders provide, good leaders, it's a deep sense of purpose and a clarity about the organization that's going to exist in the future that doesn't exist now, which is how we describe vision. And we want vision that is purposeful, that matters. One of our taglines is creating outcomes that matter most. And when that gets in place in an organization, it creates alignment. It galvanizes energy. People sign up for it because somehow their sense of personal purpose is connected with fulfilling on that, building that organization. And so it's the kind of the quintessential act of leadership. If you look at Warren Bennis's work, one of the great pundits on leadership of the prior generation, really probably our generation, hate to admit it, but he wrote a book called On Becoming a Leader, where he interviewed, I think it was 150 really accomplished leaders in various professions. And one of the things he said in there was that these leaders didn't set out to become leaders per se. They set out to follow an urge, something they cared about, something they were curious about, something that mattered, and it led him into leadership. And if you look at his book, he just keeps coming back to that as critically important. So it's also the heart of what we're calling creative leadership, because the whole creative orientation or mindset is about bringing into being what matters most, to build an organization I believe in, worthy of my life's blood, and it's then about, and this is where the competencies come in the top half of the circle. It's about becoming the person that can bring that into being. And so the creative orientation, as opposed to the reactive, the creative orientation is about becoming and creating and authoring a future, individually in our lives, collectively in our organizations. And it's juxtaposed against the reactive orientation, which is about moving away from what we don't want. It's about fixing current reality. It's more fear-driven, whereas the creative orientation is love-driven, love of the purpose, love of what we're trying to create. And so we work a lot with this tension between purpose and safety. You got to pay attention to both, but if you over toggle on safety, you put purpose at risk. And so the whole profile is built around that core tension between purpose and safety. How do we deploy ourselves in ways that create what we want, more of what we want, the future that's trying to come through us? And how do we, in fear, react, get small, or show up in ways that limit that, the fulfillment on that? So that's why it's there. And even though it's off to the right side of the circle, it is the heart of this whole orientation. And it's number one correlated. It's the most highly correlated dimension in the profile to leadership effectiveness. Number two is teamwork. On the other side, people, and because purpose galvanizes alignment, they're very highly correlated. But when you get purpose and teamwork together, you've got an organization that's really focused on creating that future.
Excellent. Bill, anything you want to add to that?
I think that probably a really important distinction here in the beginning of this first dimension we're talking about on Purposeful and Visionary, which is Bob and I co-founded the business that we're in now. Bob's the creator of the Leadership Circle profile and of the Universal Model of Leadership. So we're sitting in the room with the author. And so what I add to anything that Bob said is not the background or the history or the play. It's the literally incorporation of that background and history for me personally over about 15 years now of the practical and the practice application of that. So I come at this from somewhat on the thought leadership perspective and the work around that. I really come at it from a practice leadership standpoint. So where is it that I go in and do my work with an organization, and how is it that you take a dimension like purposeful and visionary and see that play itself out in that organization or in that business? Most of my work is primarily business. So I was thinking as Bob, you were going through this outline of purposeful and visionary and the way it played, I was thinking back to a project years ago for a company in Ohio, Cuyahoga Falls, Akron, Ohio area, working class factory that produced soap. So this was a group of Cleveland, Ohio employees that would, in many cases, be brought in from Cleveland into the factory where they produce soap. It's called Gojo Industries. And the purposeful and visionary element of that organization that came from both the founder and his then nephew that had taken the organization over was they connected what it is that those factory workers, those people in that factory that were producing every day on that floor to healthy skin. So we can actually improve the health and the welfare of human beings that in some cases, the connection on purposeful was directly to, I've got mechanics out there that use Gojo Orange. And in addition to using Gojo Orange, they use Hand Medic. And they come to us after years with Hand Medic, or after months in a year of using Hand Medic, and say for the first time, their hands are able to touch their family. Because of the calluses, because of the, in some cases, sores that have not healed, because of the things that have happened to them, because of what they do every day with their hands. And so all of a sudden, I've got a group of people on a manufacturing floor that aren't just about producing that soap, that cleaning solution every day. They're about actually improving the quality of life of that mechanic in his family relationships, in or her family relationships, in the way they can navigate. That's a whole different way to come from being a manufacturing person on the manufacturing floor. And when they connected to that, and I'll never forget the connection to that, it was by bringing in some of these mechanics that had literally had their entire family relationship change because of what happened, because they could actually touch without being an irritant to their children, to their spouse. They came in and talked about how it shifted their lives and the way they live that life on a day-to-day basis. And that's just one story of many across the board. What it means to connect to higher purpose, and what is the vision? Healthy skin. So the higher purpose is the difference we're making in the quality of life of the people that actually use our products. Significant difference, and healthy skin for all. And they built a really big business off of that because they were purpose-focused, mission-driven, and vision. So, yeah, it was incredible to see the difference.
That's a fantastic example. I'm curious if there's maybe if there are a smaller scale, how you might see purposeful and visionary show up in leaders you've worked with.
Sure. Go, Bob, and I'll add one to it.
Well, a couple things. One, it's essential in your own life. I mean, I've told this story, I wrote about it, Mastering Leadership, that when I was working early in my career, I was working in a feed manufacturing facility. And one night in the middle of the night, I'm inside a railroad car and I'm sweeping it out. We're getting the plant back online. And out of my mouth, completely unrehearsed, was, "I'm not becoming who I am." Came out loud. And I knew I'd crossed a bridge. I knew my soul had spoken. And the question that emerged out of that, which I spent quite a bit of time reflecting on and journaling about, was, what must I be about in this life in order to live the life I came here to live and not someone else's life? Leaders, best leaders, get clear on that. They have a practice of stalking that longing and navigating their way more and more into it. And Steve Jobs talked about this in that one of his last public speeches at Stanford. He said, looking forward, none of the dots connect, but if you've been on purpose looking back, they all connect in ways that are amazing. And and that can then take all the way to a corporate. I was working years ago with a healthcare system in the Midwest and the senior team, and they were not at all aligned around vision. I won't get into the messy story that led us to a 3-day offsite, but we ended up on a 3-day offsite, and the CFO very early in the session leans up to me and says, "Bob, what are we going to do spending 3 days of our time on vision? What's the point?" And I said to him, "Well, I'm not sure but let me tell you how I think about vision. You're going to describe, if we're successful in over the next 3 days, the organization that will exist in this, the healthcare organization that will exist in this um, city that doesn't exist now." And he rocked back. He said, "We've never had that conversation." And they did. And they were amazed by there was a complete redesign of the way they were thinking about and organizing their whole healthcare system. And it excited the hell out of them. And so that's and then they went about creating it. And of course, downturns happen, changes in the markets happen, and they just kept coming back. Okay, that doesn't mean we have to lay off people. How can we stay the course on our vision and redeploy people? Or so they just kept orienting on it. And that's its purpose. And that's why it's so essential to effective leadership.
Along the same lines, 1985, coming out of corporate, starting my own business at that time, and as a lot of people know, partnering with my wife in business, Cindy and I, we were doing large scale transformations of organizations and businesses. Underneath that was a purpose for us that was actually one that we really arrived at through writing the whole systems approach and the work we're doing in large scale transformation. And I can tell you, all these years later, it's just as strong as it was then, creating a world of work where people thrive. So the way that we came to this work was people didn't actually spend their time often in a job thriving. It was an ends, means to an end. And it was a 4-letter word. It was called work. And we wanted to be able to go into organizations and help create a world of work, that organization where people could thrive. And that's what we did. That's where I put it. It was all based on getting clear on purpose and vision. So the very core of that work was to get very clear on purpose and vision, and then to have that literally penetrate the entire organization. And when we talk about creating outcomes that matter to us, then we go at the heart of I want to be able to connect as a leader, the purpose that's going to make a difference for you in your organization, in our organization, in our business, regardless of what role you have or what job you do. So how is it I connect very directly to, I'm going to invest, Bob used the phrase life's blood, I'm going to invest time, which is literally finite, into something that is either going to give back to me and in service of others in a way that it's a good investment of my lifeblood, or I'm not. And if I don't make that connection, then purposeful work isn't there for me in the same way. So it's the meaning created within my life and within the lives of all those that we serve or provide product to, regardless of industry, and in the lives of those of us that do it in the organization, both individually and collectively.
Joseph Campbell said, when you're on purpose, all the doors open. When you're off, they all remain closed. And this is a perennial wisdom from the traditions, but it's also, if you look at the success literature, which I studied a lot of, if there's one predominant theme, it's get clear about what you want, goals, vision, focus on what you want. If you look at, say, one of the leading articles from the Harvard Business Review for many years, it was called Strategic Intent, and they studied big companies that were now big, that weren't big when they started, that overtook the industry, literally overtook the industry. And they said, how do they do strategic planning? How do they do that differently than their competitors? And they called it strategic intent. And they start with real clarity about a bold vision that they want to create, and they leverage current reality as far as they can each year. Whereas their competitors started with a current reality and said, how do we resolve ourselves forward? How do we make the best of our current situation? And so one created what we call creative tension, this tension between what we want and what we've got, and really hold it. And the other starts with, well, how do we move forward? And that's very, very different. And so this dimension is not, it's so important because it's what works. I've been studying quantum physics and relativity theory, and they don't get me started on all that. But the more I dive into it, the more I realize this is how the universe works and how things manifest. This is why it keeps showing up in success literature, it keeps showing up as 0.93 correlated to leadership effectiveness and our study on business outcomes and so on. This focus on what we want galvanizes forces that focusing on what you don't want and trying to fix your way forward just doesn't pull in that manifestation energy. So it's a leap step forward in creating futures.
I would say two things primarily that I start with each and every leader I work with around purpose and vision, or purposeful and visionary. And they're both important, purpose and vision, and purposeful and visionary. There's some distinction there in the way that we talk about it. The first is and I do this in parallel, but the first is I start working with them about their own purpose. Why are you here? So when I think of purpose, I think of higher purpose. And there's a conventional purpose, which is the role I play, what I do on a daily basis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's why I'm here. Why am I here? what's being asked of me, what's my purpose and all of that. And when I start to work with the leader in that and I start to play it, it starts to get more and more clear for them. And then that starts to actually bring people in because we're attracted to people that understand and are on purpose. At the same time, with what's your vision? What do you want to create in your life? Picture the future that I want to bring into existence or being. We work on that in parallel, purpose and vision. And then how about your organization? So what's the vision that we want to create? And what is the purpose that is the higher purpose that is all part of? So we work on both of those. And I would say that one of two things have happened with most leaders we work with. One, they have done some work on it, but it's not actually embedded in them or in their organization. And so it's got to be refreshed. It's got to be brought forward. And often, I mean, I was running a session this week on moving towards your vision for Honda. So, Bob and I are talking about this. We've been doing this a long time. We're both born in 1955 in June, and we're headed towards that big birthday in a few months here. We're still doing the work around purposeful and visionary that we were doing 40 years ago. And it hasn't gone out of style. It's going to be always there. It's across everything we look. So we're still doing that work, and we're still doing that work on ourselves. My purpose is evolving. Why I'm here, what I'm up to for this next period of time, chapter 4. And what that looks like is more purposeful now than it's ever been. That's emerged in some of the work I've been doing with Bob in the last 2 years. I can tell you it's not the same as it was 2 years ago. Doesn't mean that I haven't incorporated it. So doing my personal work, continue to do it. We're doing the work in the organization right now around that. So you do that in parallel all the time as a leader. Personal work, and the work we need to do as an organization. That's the leader's responsibility.
Bill, as you were talking about your own updating of sense of purpose, that's been happening for me. And I realized as you were talking that it's also related to the updating of who I am. A deeper understanding of what,
no question,
who I am, what a human being is at essence. And so as you move into higher levels of awareness about the reality we're in and who we are as human beings, purpose broadens, expands, upgrades, wants more of you.
Yeah, I was reflecting for a moment in this conversation, Bob, on our partner Steve talking about are you stalking your longings or your longing stalking you? And I had that conversation with a leader in a coaching session last week, and it literally paused them, stopped them in their tracks. Oh, you know what? It is stalking me, and I'm not on track. And I've known that for the last 2 years. I've known for the last 2 years that I actually needed to shift where I was spending my time, my energy, my life's blood, because it's stalking me. So there's a call in here for all of us if we're willing to step up into it, understand what it is, and we've got to be open to being able to listen to what that call is, and that will bring us right into what our personal purpose is all about, and it evolves over time.
The opposite of that is the fear of making such a bold move. I have to reinvent myself or my work, or I have to leave the organization or the family business or whatever or change the whole way we're thinking about it in the midst of the significant political realities of the organization I'm in. All of that kind of to be on purpose requires courage. And so this right away, you're in this tension between purpose and safety.
And I love that, Bob. You'll so appreciate this. I was doing that session this week with Honda. Bob and I kicked those sessions off. And then they go for a year working on all of this. And we are now, I looked at this week. The first one we did was 2012. So we've been working with this population of leaders, a significant portion of them engineers, for 13 years around the same work. It evolves, obviously. And before we had the moving towards your vision conversation, we had the conversation on courageous, how to have a courageous conversation. We had the session on that. They did that, then they came into this one, and they'd all had courageous conversations. It was remarkable to listen to what they were saying to each other about that. And that's driven in what we talk about as the three practices. So discern vision and purpose, understand what your fears and doubts are so that you can actually work them, and have the courageous conversations that are required. And so when you think about those three practices, which we distill, and we've expanded it to 6 now, but for this, it's good to talk to 3, they're at the core of the shift between reactive and creative. So when Bob talks about visionary and purposeful at the heart, it is the heart of this work and the universal model of leadership and the LCP. It's where we start. So, and then we continue it. It's not as if it ends, it's ongoing, just like our growth is as human beings. I would say right off the bat, and this is going to go right at the heart of it for us as coaches, we need to do our own work. So in order for me to be able to really work with a leader on their purpose, on their vision, I also need to continually be working on mine. So I don't take it for granted that I need to do my own work. I am my own biggest project. Trust me, everyone knows that about me. That's actually gained a little bit of momentum around it as we wrote Scaling Leadership and Mastering Leadership. You've got to be doing your own work as a coach. And if we're not doing our own work, then we're not authentic in our way of coaching and what we bring to the table. And that also means, as a coach, to accept that you are a leader. You're a practitioner, but you're also a leader because you're influencing. And own that leadership along with what it means to be a coach.
I was recently coaching very senior leader in Middle East, and another coach had been working with him around purpose. And the approach, from what I could tell from talking with him, had to do with what are your gifts? What are you really good at? And somehow in the intersection of gifts is your purpose. And he came to me, said, okay, so I know I'm good at this, and this, but what's the point? And I think that's a useful direction and not complete. Like, just because you're good at something doesn't mean that gives you direction of how you're going to deploy it.
Yeah.
Right. And so there is a way in which all my gifts line up with what I'm doing, but the direction of all that is something other than all those gifts. And so my question when I work this is, what lights you up? What has gotten your attention that when you're around it or near it, or you've been about it in a project or in another organization or whatever period of time in your life, even if it's short, got your attention, like you got excited about it? And because that's the longing stalking you, right? When were you most bored, restless, disinterested, flat? And what was most intensely missing in your life at that point? So when were you most alive and when were you least alive starts to get at the Joseph Campbell thing of, if it brings you joy, do more of it. So where is that for me? Steve Jobs, a good example. He quit college and studied calligraphy. I mean, what? Who does that? What? And look what he did with it. So it is getting familiar with your how the longing's stalking you and the way it's showing up in your life that you may not have noticed.
You know, I flashed on something, Bob, that we've been saying now for a long time, which is deployment of self into circumstances. And then the question is, which self? The self that we're talking about here is the one that Bob just described, which is the deployment of self into any given set of circumstances is an act of leadership that we may or may not be conscious and aware of. That's what coaches do every day. They deploy themselves into a situation, into a circumstance where they can have impact. And the question mark is, where is that impact being sourced from? So is it being sourced from a clear understanding, clarity around purpose, purpose in motion, knowing why I'm here, why I'm on this earth, what I'm here to do, what I'm here to actually deploy myself into, what lights me up, what do I love? Where does that love come from? What's the source of that love? Is that source of love coming from me? And how is it that I actually act in that way in a very conscious daily way of being? And that makes all the difference. It settles me in. So, here's my aura. I track my heart rate. When I'm on purpose, my heart rate comes down. When I'm actually living into that, which Bob was talking about, the anxiety gets significantly diminished. And I get to see it on my phone. It's like being hooked up to technology all the time. I mean, it's 24 hours a day. I can see when I'm on and when I'm off. And a significant portion of that has to do with what we're talking about here. That's why it's the heart rate. That's why it's the center. It also activates me, by the way. Just below high stress is activation. So I can get pretty excited about it. Heart rate goes up. That's a very cool thing. Are you kidding me? I love that. Give that to me all day long.